All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the fourth 988 Technical Advisory Board meeting of 2025. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name's Steve Yarbrough. I am the Deputy Director of Public Safety Communications here at the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. So that means I have the 911, the 988, and then public safety radio communications also is under my portfolio. So I'm pleased to join the advisory board here, and I'm passionate about and inspired by providing technical systems that help advance the missions of all of these organizations, both in the 988, 911, and the radio communications for our public safety professionals throughout the state of California. My history comes out of the technology space and delivering, mission critical systems for all of the frontline public safety professionals. A lot of what I've done has been in state government, both here at Public Safety Communications, but also in some other agencies at the state level doing more traditional information technology projects. I have some experience out in the private sector as well. So all of that together, I think, will, help, in leading this organization to deliver on its mandate to provide some technology solutions in this space. We're going to hear some updates as we go forward today from the program areas and the working groups that are covering a lot of the continuing activities. And my hope is as we do that, then we can have an engaging and robust dialogue about some of these things. Just serve our mission here as a technical advisory board to make sure that we're taking in the information and the expertise from all of you so that we're, putting that into the design process and making sure that we're producing a product that serves the needs that you all have who are out on the front lines, meeting the needs out in the communities. And so that's, sort of a preamble to the meeting, but I wanted to sort of take that moment. And some of you I obviously have met prior to this, and others I think this might be the first time that we've met. And so I'm pleased to be here and join you. At this time, I think we'll turn our attention to the roll call. And as I read out your name, please sound off and let me know if you're here or not. All right? So I'll start off with Dr. Bowie.
Present.
Thank you. Sherry Sinwelski.
Oh, wait, there we go. Present. Sorry.
Thank you. Diana Gutierrez.
Present.
Thank you. Ametrius Sidney.
Present.
Jeff Aber.
Present.
Tracy Gonzalez. Jennifer Kenton.
Present.
Thank you. Aaron Riley. Serena Lewis. Dr. Rafla Yuan.
Present.
Thank you. Lon Nguyen.
Present.
Thank you. Joe Sullivan.
Present.
Thank you. Terry Galvin.
Present.
And Jamila Fields.
Present.
All right. By my count, we have more than the required 8 to make the quorum, so we will continue with the meeting and conduct all the business pertinent thereto. So we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the previous meeting minutes. The board members have received those meeting minutes in advance. And so for the discussion part, are there any comments or edits from the board to the previous meeting minutes that we need to discuss? All right, seeing and hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes as they are currently written. Do I have such a motion from the board members?
Motion to approve.
Right. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so we will then move on to the voting on the motion to approve the meeting minutes. I'll do a roll call vote. Please indicate your agreement or dissent by saying either aye or nay as your name is called. We'll start with Dr. Bowie.
Aye.
Thank you. Sherry Sinwelski.
Aye.
Diana Gutierrez.
Aye.
Ametria Sidney.
Aye.
Jeff Abear.
Aye.
Jennifer Kenton.
Aye.
Dr. Rafla Yuan.
Aye.
Lon Nguyen.
Aye.
Joe Sullivan.
Aye.
Terry Galvin.
Aye.
And Jamila Fields.
Aye.
Right. The vote is unanimous and the motion carries. The minutes are approved and we will post them accordingly on the website. Thank you for that. We'll move on then to the third item on our agenda.
I'm sorry. Pardon me, Steve.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's just this one person, but I have a colleague that's trying to go online and says they haven't been let in. I just wanted to make sure that we have our online folks in the meeting as well.
Okay. All right. Do we? Yes. So the.
Okay. I'll let them know that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay, so yeah, it sounds like the environment for the online viewing of the meeting is up and running, and so we're actively monitoring the lobby and making sure that we're adding people as the icon presents itself. So if you're having difficulty on the other end of the spectrum, keep refreshing the window and trying to log in. We'll keep doing that. One point of procedure, I guess, is I think it's worth mentioning that Paul Troxell's retirement, and Chief Deputy Director, if you'd like to make a comment on that point.
Sure. I think a very familiar face to all of you and a regular participant here in this meeting was our former branch chief, Paul Truxell. Paul Truxell is enjoying a much-deserved retirement. He has had a long-standing professional experience, particularly in the 911 space, not only here in the PSC division, but also in his time working at the PSAP. So we're really going to miss his expertise. We are looking for his replacement now, but I trust that all of you join me in wishing him well in his much-deserved retirement. Deputy Director Steve Yarborough is a governor-appointed position as a deputy director. The branch chief will be reporting to the deputy director. So we will keep this board apprised as we do our search and recruitment for that position. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, so where we are on the agenda, item number 3 is public comment for matters that are on the agenda. And this is an opportunity for members of the public to voice their input on matters that are on the agenda. And so we'll start with public comment in the room, and then we will look to the online presentation for public there. Please be mindful that many people might like to make a comment, and therefore I'm asking you to limit your remarks to 3 minutes apiece. And so with that, I think we'll turn our attention to the public comment microphone over here.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. Good morning, everyone. My name is Narjis Zahori Dillon. I'm the president of California 988 Consortium, which represents the 988 crisis centers in our state. I think at this time of rising suicide rates in our country, our commitment to working together is going to be key to our ability to serve people in need in California. The 11 centers that make up the California 988 network have been answering the call and serving California residents for years, long before the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline transitioned to 988 in 2022. Some of us have been working with the Lifeline for over 20 years, since its inception in 2005. Our centers know the realities of operating 988, planning, forecasting, and though there's similarities with 911, our hope today with having many of our colleagues speak is to help you better understand the realities of the 988 demands and running a 988 center. We want to be a true resource and partner at this time for both OES, DHCS, and HHS, as opposed to having to always be reactive. We hope that by sharing our perspective, we can have a true seat at the table and be partners. And that we see the 988 surcharge as a major opportunity. It's a chance for the centers to be truly resourced to be able to meet the needs of Californians who are reaching out to us for help. It's a chance to expand our capacity to actually respond to the thousands and thousands of chats and texts that are currently rolling to the national backup centers. And it's a chance to make the 5-year 988 implementation plan come to fruition, which includes 911 diversion, mobile crisis dispatch, and many other features that would really make our crisis system more valuable. We appreciate you for listening and being our partners in this time, especially considering the uncertainty of SAMHSA funds in upcoming years and also the transition due to Prop 1 that's happening statewide from MHSA to BHSA that is impacting suicide prevention services throughout our state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ben Avian. I'm the Chief Public Affairs Officer for WellSpace Health. WellSpace Health has been providing suicide prevention services since 1953. We were providing suicide prevention services before the National Lifeline. We were there at the beginning for the National Lifeline. We were there at the beginning of 988, literally walking the halls of Congress advocating for it. Since 988 has come to California, there have been a lot of wonderful conversations. There have been a lot of great communication. However, it hasn't necessarily felt like a partnership. The crisis centers in California, we built our network based on partnership. We didn't have state agencies. We didn't have a lot of support. We built it through partnership, and it was the type of partnership you could count on at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning on Christmas Eve when someone's life depended on it. And through that, we built a true national model that is the envy of large communities across the nation. We want to have that partnership with OES. We want to have that partnership with DHCS. We know there is an interest and an intent to have that partnership, but I'll be honest, it feels a little bit, there used to be a saying in the disability community when they were fighting for disability rights, nothing about us without us. It feels like a lot of decisions are being made about us without us. And we know there's communication, but we want to sit at the table. We want to have the conversation. We want to be able to reflect on recommendations before those recommendations become final so that we can make sure it's going to meet the needs of our clients, of the people that we serve at 3 in the morning on Christmas Eve when everybody else in this room is asleep, but our team is up and answering that call. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity in California. I think California truly can define the 911-988 relationship, but it's going to take partnership because 988 is different than 911. Fundamentally different. Just because it's a 3-digit number, it doesn't mean it's the same thing. And if we can successfully work together, and I think that's what you're going to hear from a lot of my colleagues today is a desperate plea for true partnership, I think we can make that happen. But it has to start with us saying, the right people are going to be at the table and we're going to work together. We're not going to make decisions about us without us. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Taylor. I'm the Senior Director of Crisis Line Operations at D.D. Hirsch Mental Health Services. And I'm going to provide some initial comments related to agenda item number 6, which is the funding and surcharge. You know, I want to reemphasize something that Ben just said, which is that 988 is a fundamentally different service from 911. If you look at the length of time that our contacts take, especially with chat and text, you know, with the average chat and text extending 45, 55 minutes, it's just a fundamentally different service. And in our case, we are the intervention. Dispatching or connecting with mobile crisis and 911 is a last resort. And in fact, only about 2% or less of 988 contacts actually result in a connection with 911. It's critically important. In other words, the de-escalation of crisis and helping stabilize people is what we do. We do it for maybe somebody in this room. We do it for your family members. We do it for your kids, for your kids' friends, and we do so when people are at their oftentimes lowest point in their life. It's a fundamentally critical public safety network that we provide. But as Ben said, we don't have a meaningful seat at the table when it comes to a lot of these funding decisions, and that's somewhat unconscionable given the service that we provide. We are the ones doing the main work of 988, and yet OES, DHCS, and DOF are the ones who are either contributing information by which funding decisions are made, or are making the funding decisions about us without direct input from the 988 centers. We should be asked what our funding needs are, not just for right now, but what we project our funding needs are for next year and the following year, because we're the experts in the service we provide. And we have expertise in forecasting volume and forecasting staffing needs, but that's not happening. A decision has been made to decrease the 988 surcharge revenues. That's what's going to be announced later today. That's our understanding, that the 988 surcharge is being lowered from 8 cents a line to 5 cents a line. I'm quite certain that the bill sponsors that put forward AB 988 would never have imagined that the surcharge amount would go down. And in fact, this would represent the first time in the nation's history that any state that has a 988 surcharge is actually lowering the surcharge cost, and lowering it in a time when 988 demand is going through the roof. Our 3-month August to October 2025 incoming call volume as a consortium of the 988 centers in California is 25% higher compared to the same time 3 months last year, and 56% higher than the same time in 2023. Our chat and text volume has increased 33% compared to 2 years ago. Last month, October 2025, was the highest volume month on record for calls, chats, and texts combined for 988. And my final point is, our 988 call volume has not surpassed 40,000 in a single month previously, but now it has done so in each of the last 4 months. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Stefano. I'm the Director of Crisis Programs at WellSpace Health, and I also wanted to make a very brief comment about agenda item number 6, the 988 surcharge. So Matt and Ben and Nargis gave some great information and good data. I just wanted to also point out that this year alone, we've continued to build out the 988 to mobile crisis response in Sacramento County. And our collaborative approach has resulted in 2,155 connections this year to mobile crisis. So this has benefited the community and solidified the understanding that people in crisis always have not only someone to call, but someone to go out and respond to them. So to continue to build this program and meet the needs of those vulnerable community members, our staffing model must accommodate the extra time it takes to make those connections from the callers and texters and chatters to the mobile crisis team. So we ask that funding must keep the pace with both the increased volume to 988 and also the increased time it takes to fully respond to those members of our community. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cece. I'm the Text Line Program Manager of Crisis Support Services of Alameda County. I will also be making a public comment on Agenda Item 6, the 988 surcharge rate setting. In the last year, our team has expanded our crisis chat and text capacity by over 156%. Yet it's discouraging to see over 60% of chats and texts from Californians in need of support continue to go out of state due to our inability to increase the system's capacity at the needed rate. Considering a high percentage of chatters and texters are medium to high risk, I believe that we should prioritize supporting these help seekers in state to ensure connection to appropriate resources, such as mobile crisis teams. This can only be made possible by making bold investments in the infrastructure needed to grow and expand our chat and text capacity in California. We appreciate your leadership in ensuring all Californians have access to care.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Wolfinger, and I am the Director of Crisis Services for Crisis Support Services of Alameda County. And I'd like to just make a few comments regarding items 5 and 7, Cal OES NGA 911 technology platform. 988 centers have been patient, collaborative partners in this process. Since 2022, we provided direct feedback about our technology needs. Our center was part of the initial cohort to help design the platform, and yet 3 years later, there still is no OES NGA platform fully ready for deployment. More meetings on this are canceled than held, and centers are frequently left in the dark on if or how our feedback is meaningfully incorporated. Cal OES holds the responsibility of funding technology for 988 centers, yet centers have had to front the cost for their own technology needs, and OES reimbursements to centers have been very slow, with the centers still waiting to receive reimbursement. This is a significant financial burden. Over the last year, there have been 3 changes in OES 988 leadership, and though we are understanding to the challenges that this causes, it's important to note the negative impact on our centers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leanne. I'm a Quality Assurance Data Analyst Manager for Crisis Support Services of Alameda County. And while I'll be speaking to the scope of our center, as someone who has looked at the trends and is in charge of forecasting and trying to figure out the trends so that we can sustainably meet our needs, I'll be making a comment on Agenda Item 6, the 988 surcharge rate setting. So 988 funding is one of our few reliable funding streams, and our priority remains to meet 988's key performance indicators while scaling our services sustainably to meet demands. As a 988 servicing center, we've made meaningful progress to strive towards those key performance indicators despite our historically and even now underfunded capacity. Across chat and text last year this time, for our center, we served 1,899 988 calls and texts. This year, we served 3,345, and that is at least an 80% increase in volume in 1 year. And we've made progress towards our performance goals at the same time. California centers currently have a collective 10% abandon rate, more than 4,000 calls a month, so high answer rates and fast speed to answer are not just administrative metrics. We understand that they're direct indicators of whether or not the system can fulfill its life-saving mission. No one in crisis should be left waiting given the risk of irreversible harm, and any reduction in funding will place a significant strain on our already limited capacity supporting the tens and thousands of contacts reaching us. As a quality assurance professional, I feel the weight of these figures and see them as an early warning sign of the system being stretched, and I urge all of us to work together to build a more resilient 988 system that can support community crisis care. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, any other public comment in the room? Right, how about online? Looks like we have one.
I have a comment. Is it okay to do so?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. Hi, yes. Hi, my name is Tan Hall, and I'm the mother of Miles Hall. who was shot and killed by police, Walnut Creek Police Department in 2019. And I'm here to comment on Section 5 of the agenda, the 911-988 Interoperability Working Group. And so basically, we've created the Miles Hall Foundation, which was created because my son, Miles, was killed in a mental health emergency. And we want to make sure as an organization, our dedication is dedicated to transforming crisis response and preventing law enforcement involvement in behavioral health emergencies. And we offer the following comments and recommendations. We want to revise the threat to life or property standards. The phrase immediate threat to life or property conflates personal safety with potential property damage, which can lead to unnecessarily police involvement in a nonviolent crisis. This is exactly what happened to my son when he broke a window, and police was called for this. So I want to make sure that we know property-related risks should not automatically trigger a law enforcement response. We need to be clear that human life is a priority over property. We recommend the following, recommend the following, which is to make sure that threats to personal safety and non-threatening behavioral disturbance or property concerns, which that could be handled through a 988 response. And we also want to make sure that we are clarifying the criteria for identifying a mental health crisis. We want to make sure that the 911 dispatchers can clearly identify if a call involves a mental or behavioral health crisis. But it provides little guidance on how they should make that determination, and we have the following recommendations. We want to make sure that there's a clear decision-making criteria or indicators, so beyond a threat to life or property, such as maybe disorientation or emotional distress, and then maybe a sample screening questions or a decision-making tree that can easily be used to 1 to 3 minutes during the call to help a dispatcher distinguish between calls that warrant law enforcement versus a behavioral health intervention. And then also, we want to make sure that we emphasize a non-police crisis response options. So given California's investment in community-based crisis response through AB 988 and local programs such as A3 in Contra Costa County, the document should reinforce that law enforcement should be the last resort, not the default. Suggested addition would be when behavioral health mobile crisis teams or community-based responders are available, they should be prioritized over law enforcement or in-person intervention. So I already submitted a public comment, a written comment. So I have a 5-page letter that is sent to you guys. So I'd really appreciate if you guys can really take in account to how serious this is for someone in a mental health emergency who needs help without police. So this is life-saving. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I suspect there might be one other one out there. Is it a Justin?
That's right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Lee. I am a crisis line manager at Crisis Support Services of Alameda County. I'll be making public comment on agenda item 6, the 988 surcharge rate setting. So in the last year, our center has experienced a 65% increase in our call volume. The growing call volume for our center and across the state is a continuation of the trend since the start of 988. This is due to an increase in community outreach, increase in community stress due to federal policies and economic uncertainty, and also the significant reduction in capacity for other support services. For example, the California Peer-Run Helpline has reported that their ability to answer calls has decreased significantly after they cut nearly 200 employees earlier this fall. With the implementation of Prop 1, our county expects to lose more prevention and early intervention services. It's fair to assume that this will continue to increase reliance on 988 for support and access to care. Our ask is that if you consider these dynamics as you plan for the future of the 988 system in California. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One last time, any other online hands raised?
Yes, this is Juan Troy with Santa Clara County 988, and I'm one of the leaders there, and I'd like to comment on agenda item 6, the 988 surcharge as well. So over the last 3 years, Santa Clara County 988 has had a significant call volume increase, and I think I'm echoing others that have spoke about this, but for FY 2022 and 23, our call volume was 24,497, and then in the next fiscal year, 23-24, our volume was 28,481. And in our last year, FY 24-25, our volume was 31,372. So this volume represents more than 28% increase in calls, since really for the past 3 years. In addition to this increase in our call volume, we also manage chat and text like others, and the volume increased for the past 2 years. While it wasn't significant, it was still increased by 1%, which again, all of this impacts our staffing, and I'm providing you with these numbers to show that our call volume, the chat and text, is steadily increasing, and its reduction in the surcharge, could possibly impact us from a staffing perspective. So what we're urging you all to do is to ensure that we have full transparency into the allocation process, and that we urge you all to consider, the real world impact of these decisions that have impact not to just Santa Clara County, but it really impacts all of the counties operating currently under financial constraints while we try to save lives every single day. Thank you.
Thank you. How are we looking now? Any other hands raised?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I'd like to give comment.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Cassie Dibble, and I'm making my comments on behalf of ACLU Disability Rights Project and ACLU of Northern California regarding the 911 to 988 transfer recommendation document that the board will discuss today, I believe at agenda item number 5. We thank Cal OES for making the revised transfer guidance document available to the public earlier this week. We appreciate that the current draft clarifies that because different jurisdictions operate under different circumstances, the document aims to stimulate discussion and offer preliminary recommendations to guide how local jurisdictions formulate their policies. We also recognize and appreciate that this draft removes language that unduly narrowed the circumstances in which a transfer could be permissible based on factors such as the identity of the caller. However, we urge the working group to consider further clarification regarding the applicability of these recommendations in jurisdictions that have mental health crisis teams capable of providing an in-person emergency response. For example, the draft recommendations state that a 988 counselor may transfer a call to 911 when, quote, welfare intervention via phone is deemed ineffective or insufficient. Going on to state that, quote, to ensure the caller's safety, the situation should be escalated for in-person intervention through 911. But this guidance would not make sense for a local jurisdiction that has crisis response teams that could be dispatched through 988, equipped to provide in-person responses. Likewise, suggesting that any threat of property damage should render transfer unavailable, and excluding calls made by third parties on behalf of or about someone who meets criteria may run contrary to local jurisdictions' efforts to make informed decisions about when calls should receive alternative crisis response. While we recognize that these criteria are permissive rather than mandatory, we urge the board to make explicit that the availability of crisis response teams through 988 should impact how local jurisdictions formulate their local transfer policies, and that jurisdictions can and should develop more expansive transfer criteria where there are appropriate resources available through 988 to respond. This aligns with national guidelines which discourage law enforcement involvement in mental health crisis response, quote, unless special circumstances warrant their presence. Finally, given that the current draft document being considered by the board today was not available on the Cal OES website until 2 days ago, we asked the board to delay taking action on the draft until the public has had adequate opportunity to review and provide input. Thank you for your consideration.
All right. Thank you. Any other public comment online? All right. Hearing none, we will then bring that agenda item to a close. Thank you for all the public comments that were offered, and they've been documented in our normal note-taking process, and we will consider them and incorporate them appropriately. I think with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is the Cal OES Legislative and Governmental Affairs update. We have our Legislative Affairs representative come to the microphone, please.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning. My name is Paul McGinnis, Legislative Coordinator for Cal OES. I'll just be giving a few key legislative dates that are upcoming, as well as go over 3 chaptered state bills and 4 federal bills that we continue to monitor for reference for the board. So the governor's deadline to pass all bills was October 13th of 2025. All statutes, excluding those that had an urgency clause, will take effect January 1st, 26. The legislature will be reconvening on January 5th, 26, and the governor's proposed budget is required to be released no later than January 10th of 26. I'll now go into just a brief overview of state and federal bills. As a side note, we will be making this bill list available to the board. And then we also have our full list of bills that Cal OES tracks and analyzes on our Cal OES Legislative Affairs page that will also be made available. So the first bill is AB 330, Assemblymember Rogers. This bill extended the operation of the Local Prepaid Mobile Telephony Services Collection Act until January 1st of 2031. This bill was signed by Governor Newsom on October 10th. Next is AB 645, Assemblymember Carrillo. This bill requires by January 1st of 2027, a public safety agency that provides 911 call processing services for emergency medical response to provide pre-arrival medical instructions to 911 callers that are requiring medical assistance. The bill also specifies what medical assistance they should be trained on. And this bill was signed by the governor on October 3rd. Last state bill is AB 727. So this bill, starting on July 1st of 26, will require public schools grades 7 through 12 and public institutions of higher ed that issue ID cards to additionally have printed on the ID cards the telephone number and text line for a specified LGBTQ plus suicide hotline, which is the Trevor Project. That's in addition to 988 that is already required to be on those cards. That bill was signed by the governor on October 10th. Now I'll move to just real quick, just 4 federal bills that we're continuing to monitor. First is HR 540, Congressmember Norma Torres. This would make certain revisions to the standard occupational classification system, which would establish a separate code for public safety telecommunicators. This bill is currently in the House Committee on Education and Workforce. Next is HR 2937, the Protect 911 Act. Congressmember Robin Kelly would require Secretary of HHS to improve the detection, prevention, and treatment of mental health issues among public safety telecommunicators. This bill is currently in the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Next is S 290. Congressmember Barrasso would direct Secretary of Interior to upgrade existing emergency communication centers in units of the National Park System to Next Gen 911. This bill is currently in Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. And the last bill is S666, First Responders Wellness Act. Senator Gillibrand would increase access to mental health, substance abuse, and counseling services for first responders, as well as for other purposes. This bill is in the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions currently. So that concludes my state and federal legislative update for today. I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Any questions from the board members on the legislative update? All right. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes agenda item number 4. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, the working group reports. We'll start out with the 988 and 911 interface working group. If we could please have the member of the working group give the update.
Thank you. Jeff Hebert, I'm chair of the interface working group. We held a working group meeting on October 20th with various participants representing different interests, the PSAP community, the 988 community, mental health community, et cetera. The 911 988 transfer recommendations document that was created by Cal OES was presented to the members of the working group and discussed, and information was gathered and feedback was gathered as to the information that's existing in the document. So what I'd like to do is present just a high-level overview of the comments that were received, the feedback that was received. All of the feedback that was received was already submitted to Cal OES for consideration for revision and inclusion in the document.
Jeff, just real quick, I don't
Yes.
want to derail you, but
Sure.
for the board members, this is the document in question is in your binder under tab 4 if you wanted to review that as we go along.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. So I'll just begin here with, like I said, a high-level overview. There was feedback that the draft needs clear definitions and some of the terminology that's used and clarity and consistency, talking about, for some examples, like crisis counselor, a 988 center, what interoperability means, transfer, things like that. So the potential for an inclusion of whether it be a table of definitions or something that provides more clarity so everyone has the same understanding of what those words mean. The inclusion of talking about creating MOUs or agreements between 988 centers and their served PSAPs, removing language that compels that MOUs be created, as was talked about during the working group meeting, that the nature of the number of PSAPs, the size of the PSAPs, the jurisdictions served, and those 988 centers that they interact with those jurisdictions can differ. And the creation of certain agreements could be problematic and cautionary for some jurisdictions depending on how they approach it. So talking about more about it being a recommended practice of creating an MOU, and the MOU including things like agreed upon 10-digit phone numbers for making transfers, as was noted during the meeting, that the ability for a 988 center to just transfer a call and dial the number 911 is not necessarily going to get them the appropriate PSAP best able to help the individual that needs assistance. And having the 988 center or the 911 center, vice versa, transferring to a publicly accessible 10-digit line might put the transferred call in a delayed status for being answered. Some additional comments about further clarifying transfer procedures, talking about doing warm transfers or connected transfers to make sure that the transferred caller to the other center, whether it be 911 or 988, is actually successfully transferred, announced, and maybe even some information being given to the transferred center as to the name of the caller, the situation, and other relevant information. Discussion about including language access. When you have a caller that calls, for example, 911 that speaks a language other than English, most PSAPs are going to necessitate engaging a third-party translation service. And then once a determination is made that the caller needs to be transferred to a 988 center, further clarifying how that handoff is going to occur. Will it remain with the translation service that was engaged by the PSAP, or on the 988 center to have to now engage their translation service if necessary? What information should be shared? The comments were received that additional documentation or guidance in the transfer document should be documented as far as what information should be passed along. There was a comment by some of the 988 centers about having the PSAP be able to provide an incident number, so that way if the 911 center is transferring a caller to a 988 center, that they include an incident number if they have it available, so that way if the 988 center has to do a follow-up call with the PSAP, it's easier to use as a reference number, as well as being able to relay information that's safety related, such as weapons, intoxication, or active threats that are being made. One of the noted gaps that was mentioned was there's nothing by way of training, talking about what type of training should be provided to 911 dispatchers as well as the 988 crisis counselors as far as how to implement their local agency policies and procedures, as well as the procedures needed for making the transfers or even assessing the need for a transfer. So being able to include guidance on some measure of training or training standards that should be considered. And then that was pretty much, like I said, the high-level overview for the feedback that was discussed during the working group meeting. Subsequent to the meeting, we did receive a letter, as was mentioned during the public comment, from the Miles Hall Foundation. Some of those comments were already made during the public comment, but I'd like to highlight some of those. I think it would be important for us to continue discussing when we talk about the guidance document. Giving consideration to the current wording that says threat to life or property, and revising that to look at the property standard as maybe not being the requirement for engaging law enforcement services. Clarifying mental health crisis identification, being able to give better guidance to dispatchers for identifying potential mental health crisis or other related crisis. Prioritizing warm handoffs and real-time collaboration between the two centers when those transfers are made. Again, not engaging in cold transfers. Emphasizing or highlighting the effort to not engage law enforcement response when it's not necessary. Training component, as was mentioned before. And then some questions were posed in that document. I'm hoping that maybe we'll be able to make that document available to, because I don't think it's in our binder, to the board for review, just for further clarification and insight for the board members. So that's the high-level overview, the information we collected. That information and feedback was provided to Cal OES, and that's my report.
All right. Thank you for that report. You know, the nature of these recommendations, and I think it was mentioned in the comments leading up to this, and again here, is it can't prescribe all of the possible permutations that any of the answering centers will run into. There's some level of site-specific protocol that would be needed to guide the actions on a case-by-case basis. And so this document obviously can't carry all of that information in it, but having, the, higher level recommendations and then deferring to the local areas, I think is a way where the expertise of the local area can be sort of fused with what this recommendation sheet offers as well. So I'm interested in the board's insights and thoughts, advice and recommendations on what has been produced so far. Yes, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I have additional comments in addition to our chair, Albert. So, this work group has been created and meeting, working for the last 2.5 years. I knew because I participated in the very beginning. So, I mean, we met for over a number of months with in the committee, there's 911 representative, 988 representative, community members, expert on the subject matters. And as a result, the working group draft the so-called 988 recommendations and then posted, have not only discussed among the board, but also posted on the OES website since March of 2024. And since then, throughout 2024, the community members and the board were also invited and given opportunities to provide input and feedback. And I think as a result, there was a lot of feedback and input that was integrated into the draft, the draft language. And I also remember that toward the end of 2024, we found out that there was a national guidance by NENA. And because of that, our chair recommended that we take a look at that NENA language and then also see if we can integrate some of that language into this draft. And I believe that we did a lot of that, and OES also did a lot of integration. And as a result, we met in October, went over that, and to develop what we have now is a so-called, hopefully a final recommendation. We also know that there can never be a final recommendations, because unless the board decides there's no longer the need for the working group, then it's final, but otherwise it should be a work in progress. So because of that, I don't think there'll be ever time to be a finalized document, knowing that this is a high level general recommendation guidelines for the local 911, 988 to work together to come up with what works for them, like you mentioned earlier. So I hope that either by the end of this year or early next year, that we should commit it to really take action on whatever recommended, knowing that it will never be final, because as the local centers, take this recommendation, develop their own procedures, there'll be things that come up. And then because of that, there'll be the need to, tune and tweak and so on to make it a living and document. So, I think that just speak for the transition in Santa Clara County, there's been a lot of local agencies waiting for this, guidelines from the state so that they can use to apply to our local level to make it work for all of us. But they've been waiting for 2.5 years now. Mm-hmm. So I think it's time that we act on it, knowing that there will be additional feedback and to see how we can improve the system. But we cannot just keep waiting to get more feedback, because that would never happen.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I think your point's well taken, that we don't ever really reach the finish line on a document like this, because the capabilities that are constantly changing out there would always then need to somehow either be reflected here or in the local operating procedure for wherever area we're talking about. So I think it's an excellent point. Any other comments from the board? Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to support what Lon said, and also just wanted to add a couple of things. There is a lot of good work that is being done already for 911 diversion in communities across the state. And I think I heard you mention that there really wasn't training for 911 operators. And there isn't a statewide training that I'm aware of that's been issued across the board. But we've developed a lot of training at D.D. Hirsch that we're working with several PSAPs down in LA. And we're constantly kind of updating it based on feedback from the operators in terms of what their needs are and how to make it better for them. So there are opportunities, to share and learn from each other. And I also wanted to note, it's kind of in the document inherently, but I wonder if it's strong enough, in my opinion. While we absolutely want to partner with the local PSAPs to provide the opportunity for 911 diversion, I feel like that one section where it almost reads like they could just go ahead and start transferring to 988. And in the document at the top, it says, that the recommendation is that there's an MOU first. But I'm wondering if that should be a little bit stronger. Just because we've had the experience already at D.D. Hirsch where PSAPs have said that, oh yeah, we're starting to divert 911 calls to you, and we're like, well, you didn't tell us that you're doing that. How are you doing that? And if they're just directing them straight to 988, it's not necessarily going to come to the right center. And so it feels like to me maybe that could just be a little bit more clear in this document that that PSAP should really communicate with their local 988 centers and form an MOU before they start this work.
If I can make a few comments on that. So when I was talking about training, it's not that training is not available or doesn't exist. In the current training for dispatchers in the state certified course by Post, they actually now have a mental health section, and so the training's there. I was talking about the identified need for what the state recommends the minimum level of training should be, both for 911 dispatchers and on the 988 side. And it's not just for handling mental health calls, but also the process in between the interaction between the two centers. So just from clarification there. The other thing is that was, we recognize that, and that was the discussion and the point of an MOU. Just like a 988 center can't or should not just transfer to 911 because they might not be getting the right PSAP. PSAP should not be transferring to 988, and that's where that clarity of the MOU is, I think, necessary between the centers, because it's going to vary and differ between jurisdiction and region. And I think that's where it's really key here. This document in no way, I think, can just be rolled out and say, here you go, now start transferring. This is the baseline. That's much like what was already stated, that is the building blocks that we start to build on, and using the experiences like other parts like D.D. Hirsch has had in LA with the interactions of PSAPs.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. I guess maybe it's just me, but when I read the document, I'm not sure if that stands out quite enough. If somebody was just picking this up and didn't really know much.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a great discussion, because it sounds like the way it's being addressed, at least down at D.D. Hirsch, is to proactively engage and then develop things sort of almost peer-to-peer, right? So that it makes sense for, it might not even be the same for any two PSAPs that would be in the D.D. Hirsch area, right?
Yeah. I mean, the training and protocols are usually fairly similar, but sometimes there's things that we need to adjust or customize for the PSAP. But there's also been challenges technologically as well, which I know hopefully with the new platform that will be helping. But right now there's a lot of challenges where they try to, even if they are working with us directly, where the technology, there's a lot of kinks to be worked out. I know Kurt's helped us with that in different times. And so, I just, there are a lot of individual issues that have to kind of be worked out for every PSAP. It's not kind of a blanket rollout.
Right. So in your experience then, are those documented into sort of a template that could be leveraged as an example that might be an addendum to this document and therefore inform other areas who want to engage in the same process?
We at D.D. Hirsch, we've certainly been keeping a log of all of the lessons that we've learned.
Yeah.
It would have to be organized in some way to make it a little bit more useful to the public. But absolutely, I think that there's some lessons learned that we and probably other centers across the network could contribute to.
Yeah. Because what I'm thinking is maybe the work group could then, as a step to advance this, reach out and get some of that, boilerplate to generalize it to then make this document and have an example of how it might look in their area. And then that would put us at a point where we're providing sort of a direction for people to follow. We can publish the recommendations. And then from there, it really does turn into an on-the-ground coordination process. But we've at least not delayed publishing the recommendations that we do have, understanding that the recommendations will have to migrate as new technology and new on-the-ground circumstances go along. So thank you for that. Yes.
Yeah, so given the additional information and input that we receive at this meeting, I'd like to see if the board is willing to commit to having this document, having the work group meet for one more time, integrating additional suggestions or comment or input from the community and various groups that Chair Albert received, and then finalize the document and have it ready for the board to take action by the next meeting.
So if I'm understanding correctly, because I think I get it, and it kind of aligns with what you were saying earlier about wanting to have something sort of pinned down and published, but simultaneously the new information included. And I think in keeping, I'm sensitive to the comment we heard in the public comment area where giving more time to have this document reviewed before the board takes action. So what I think I'm hearing is that sounded an awful lot like a motion to have that be the plan going forward for the board, is to have the work group meet one more time, incorporate that with the intent of voting on it at the next meeting. So I will accept that as a motion to propose that as a resolution that we want to undertake as a board. And if I have a second to that, then we could take action to have that be our resolution going forward.
Can I make a comment?
You may proceed, yes.
Thanks. I wanted to echo and agree with the comments that are being made on the board right now of being a little bit more clear around the MOU. I love the idea of the template and guidance tool for agencies. And then I want to just lift up the comment about mobile crisis teams and modifying that area of the transfer procedure as well, and really calling out mobile crisis when available, since that is called out in legislation. I think it really is warranted to be within this procedure as well, that we would call that mobile crisis prior to a 911 call if the situation calls for such.
Thank you. All right. So then do I have a second on that resolution that we resolve to finalizing a draft over the next 12-week period?
But before we do that, sorry.
Okay.
Can I ask to be a member of the working group?
Yes, absolutely.
We need to check because we need to make sure we don't have a quorum of this board. We
Okay.
already have board members that are participants, so we'll have to do a count
Okay.
to make sure we don't run afoul of creating an unintentional quorum of this group and that working group.
Okay.
But
Well,
I think we'll be fine because I think we just can't have 8 is what it is. Is that the count, Steve? 8?
Well, 8 for a quorum, but I think Bagley Keene, so we would like to have our council weigh in on that.
I'm going to go ahead and, out of sheer precaution, just go ahead and do a little bit of research on that before we add anybody to the group, just for Bagley Keene purposes.
Right.
But I'll get right on that.
Yeah, we were informed at a prior meeting by council that
Yeah,
we couldn't,
because-
so if you could get clarity on that, would be great.
Yeah. So essentially what it is California calls it the rule of 2. So long as you have 2 board members together, that's fine. But with larger board members, obviously you can't have a meeting of a majority.
Right.
Which again is the 8, so that's fine, we're good there. But there are a couple little ramifications, so I'm just going to double check. But I don't see any like red sirens blaring, issues. I just want to make sure.
All right, so we'll have some follow-up on
May
that
I make a comment?
Okay, thank you.
prior to adding.
I previously I had also asked to participate and had the same response. So I would like to also be considered at WellSpace Health. We have been in several pilot programs for 911, 988 diversion. We've been doing several things that include mobile crisis to the people online that have made comments. And so I would like to participate if available.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
So, while the motion is still being entertained, can I second the motion?
Okay.
May I make one more request? I think one thing that would be nice is to understand the process by which we are accepting public comment. I'm just kind of wanting to offer something that we do on the Health and Human Services side, which is there's processes by which we ask vetted or interested stakeholders or community groups to preview the documents and submit written comments to us, like state associations, like other state departments. With this document in the past, Cal HHS, DHCS, and EMSA collectively put in a written comment and submitted the information to the chair of the interface working group and the chair of this advisory board. So it's all collected one together. So I don't know what exactly is the process at OES for incorporating state partners or state associations or local implementation partners to submit comments in a collective fashion, so that it's all kind of organized and gathered together. And then if there's an actual public comment period that is posted on the website and say, this document is open for comments for 2-4 weeks or however it is. And then at that time, we'll take everything and then we'll work on it. So that's kind of just something that hasn't been quite clear to me with this process. And I wonder if we can make that amply clear.
So I think the answer, or at least part of the answer to that question, is that because we're not actually making regulations of any kind, there really isn't that structured and formal of a, posted for public comment for a number of days. I think the way we address it here is through the working group and through the public comment phase that we have as part of this group. Certainly, the recommendations that come up in public comment are taken down and filtered into the work group's, issues to resolve. And I think, as we have this document posted out there and available for review for an extended period of time, then more comments will come in and they will be submitted to the board itself, which will then be funneled over to the working group. So I hope that clarifies the way public comment works in this case, which I think is a little bit different than what you were describing for the reasons stated before, that this is really a set of recommendations rather than a binding regulation or policy of any kind. So, so with that being said, then we had a motion to resolve to go through that process between now and the February meeting. And so I think I was looking to see if there was a second so that we could adopt that as our stance on this issue going forward.
So for clarification, the motion is to have the working group meet again.
Yep.
Collect additional information, make revisions, present it to this board for a vote of acceptance by the next board meeting?
Yeah, with the intent that that would be a document that we could publish as our recommendations, with the understanding that it's never a finished product and will be subject to future revision as additional pertinent information arises.
I'll second the motion.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second. I understand that we need to have an opportunity for the public to weigh in on that proposed motion. And so at this time, are there members of the public who would like to add information to that discussion point before we take it to a vote? Seeing none in the room, are there any online who would like to make a comment on that point? All right, hearing none, then we will take the motion on the table to the vote to resolve to, over the next 12 weeks, incorporate the stated changes and resolve to have a vote to finalize the document at our next meeting. All right, so on that issue, I will take the roll call to cast the votes. Aye in favor, nay opposed. I'll start Dr. Bowie.
Aye.
All right. Sherry Sinwelski.
Aye.
Diana Gutierrez.
Aye.
Ametrius Sidney.
Aye.
Jeff Aber.
Aye.
Jennifer Kenton.
Aye.
Dr. Rafla Yuan.
Aye.
Lan Nguyen.
Aye.
Joe Sullivan.
Aye.
Terry Galvin.
Aye.
Jamila Fields.
Aye.
Thank you. The vote is unanimous, therefore the resolution succeeds, and we will adopt that as our course of action and put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you. Okay. Any further updates from the Interface Working Group?
No, thank you.
All right. We will move on then to the next working group. This is the Accessibility and Equal Access Working Group. Is there an update from that working group?
Yes, this is Antu Bui. I'll go first, and then I'll hand it over to my co-chair, Dr. Rafla Yuan. The Accessibility and Equitable Access Working Group did meet on October 20th. We reviewed the draft 911-988 transfer and provided written feedback to the chair of the Interface Working Group as well as the chair of this board. Another item that we discussed at the last working group was on the use of augmentative alternative communication, working group members had wondered how people using those technology were contacting 911 or 988, and whether we have any kind of resource or guidance for how crisis counselors or dispatchers interact with, say, someone with intellectual or developmental disorder using augmentative alternative communication, and what kind of training crisis counselors or dispatchers might need in order to interact with caregivers of people who need such technology. I think that's at a high level. I do know maybe Dr. Rafla Yuan, you might have some comments about what we've been working on in the working group.
Yes. One other thing that I would add is there's been a request from the working group. We have a number of new members at this point to better understand the capabilities, including what type of categories of data that the CRM will be including going forward. In the past, I think perhaps CURT and or NGA partners had been able to provide a preview of what the interface would look like, as well as what those categories were. So at this point, I know it's been a number of months since we had that presentation. So the CRM may have evolved, and even if it's still the same, we have a request from our working group members to better our new members to better understand the CRM.
Yeah, we'll take that as an action item to put on the agenda for next time, to be able to offer that preview / walkthrough of what data elements would be included in there. Thank you for that. All right. Any questions or comments from the board on the report out from the Accessibility and Equal Access Working Group? All right. Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to the third working group. This is the 988 Consortium Working Group. And is there an update from that working group for the board
Yes, I can
today?
provide an update. Point of clarification, it is actually the implementation working group. And while we have center representation, we also have a PSEP participant, and Cal OES obviously is a partner in that. And it is the implementation working group. And our purpose is to operationalize and track the stages of implementation for the unified platform and the CRM system for the crisis centers. So we are an active group, and we met both in September and October. We were scheduled to meet in November, but we did not have Cal OES representation, and the meeting is held by Cal OES, so we were not able to meet. And we didn't know the meeting was canceled, but we were prepared to meet. We spent the last several months understanding the equipment needs of the center and the process by which we are meeting our technology needs. Currently, there is about $405,000 in identified technology needs and outstanding expenditures that have been identified. About $70,000 of that has made its way through the current process and is waiting for an actual reimbursement, for final reimbursement. The process was formalized this past spring, and several centers began the process around the May timeframe. We know that about 3 centers have been unable to submit requests because it's unclear how long the process will take from the initial request to reimbursement. We have a variety of size of center, and their ability to make this type of expense, have this kind of expense outstanding varies between our centers. So that has led us to wonder if this is the best process for all of the centers to meet our technology needs. That's something we wanted to bring to the board, whether the current process adequately meets our needs.
And by process, you're specifically the process for reimbursement?
The Cal OES process, the entire process, yes, from initial request through the Cal OES process of documentation and approval and purchase and final approval, and then eventual reimbursement, which we don't yet know. So none of us can say this process takes 180 days because nobody's yet been reimbursed.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
One of the members of the public, I believe it was from Alameda, mentioned a reimbursement delay issue. Is this the same issue?
This is, yes, are talking about the same process.
So I will tell you, I've written that down as something that we certainly are going to go back and look into. But I appreciate the relationship between the two.
Okay. I think that we, as a working group, I'm wondering about next steps as far as understanding what may be next to continue to partner and discuss the center needs.
So the process itself is, you're only partly clear on what that is, because the second half of the process, the part where the reimbursement happens, hasn't happened yet.
So I think we understand what I think Kurt has, and his team has done a great job of explaining all of the steps in the process.
Okay.
What we're not clear on is how long each step might take.
Okay.
And then we haven't had a successful reimbursement to be able to say to the consortium, this is start to finish what this looks like. So our other centers who are on the fence, and we all have technology needs. Everything you've heard today is about all of the growth that we have. So there's a lot of need. So just kind of the clarity of this is the process. This is the timeline, I should say, because the process has been made very clear. Kurt has done a great job.
So I can say, I guess what I'm hearing, my takeaway from this is not just, sharing with folks what the process is, but what I'm interested is if there's opportunities for process improvements. Governmental processes always take longer than I would like. And I'm sure Kurt and Paul have done a wonderful job, but I also want to kind of put our headquarters team on this to see if there's something that we can do to shave off some time. So I'm taking that, and we have the Deputy Director of Administration sitting out in the audience, and then we'll get together with Kurt. And but we should be able to articulate that to folks. So I think that's on us.
Okay. I think Sherry.
I appreciate hearing that, Lisa. I think it has been a struggle for many of the centers, and it's not just about, oh, we're owed a little bit of money. This is for equipment that's needed for counselors to take 988 calls. And so, when centers can't purchase that equipment, or when they're having to pay those expenses out of pocket and not get reimbursed, it causes a lot of challenges.
And I think, I haven't discussed this with Kurt yet, but I'm hoping that we have data, right, that would give us a sense of how long these centers are having to float, right? Because that's certainly not the intention here. So that will play into kind of the sense of urgency to come up with a process.
Yeah, if you all don't have it, I'm sure we can help you guys to put that together.
I'm kind of looking for eye contact with Kirk. So we'll make sure that we have what we need to kind of lock something down.
I just want to add that because we learned that among the 11 centers, each center has different capacities and so on. While some for some larger center may be able to wait for 3 or 4 months for reimbursement, other smaller center might not have that ability to wait for 3 or 4 months for reimbursement. So because of that, I think even though the state might have its own timeline about how long do they have that they have to reimburse, 3 months or whatever, smaller center might not have that 3 months. Yeah, sure. So, thank you.
No.
So this is an item we'll continue to be in our implementation work group and discuss and even maybe take a look at whether or not there's a different way entirely for us to meet our technology needs and the reimbursements from the partnerships.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, and you can expect that we'll have some new information to share on that point as we circle back up and get it figured out amongst ourselves here. We can see, to the Chief Deputy Director's point, if there are opportunities there to improve the experience, if not the process. So,
thank you.
Thank you for that.
That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the board on the implementation working groups report out?
No. I'm going to go ahead and respond to the option of adding additional folks to the working groups. We're going to go with our previous advice and stick to our rule of 2 for Bagley-Keene purposes, so that no additional implications may be made under the law.
Okay. So then, is there opportunity for people to submit their thoughts, at least, to those 2?
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, absolutely. Anyone can bring their thoughts to the working groups. You can email any information to the emails that are listed on our agenda, just like you would public comment, and it can be routed to each working group. Any member of this board can submit comments, questions, anything like that to the working group. You can do it you can submit your questions in this meeting, or you can also have them routed through staff.
Thank you for that clarification. So what that means then is we can't add additional members to the group, but they can participate still by having that input into the deliberations of the work group. So I hope that at least addresses the desire to partake in the discussion, if not in a large format group setting. So.
Sure, thank you. I'll let my chief medical officer know.
All right. Thank you. Okay. The fourth working group, or the fourth item under the working groups is okay, I'll allow it. Step to the microphone, please. I apologize if I'm out of Yeah. Okay. Green light on.
Okay. Hello, my name is Bill McCabe. I am the CEO of Family Service Agency, and we provide 988 crisis line services to Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties. We've been doing it for 23 years, and the vast history of what that looked like is we had somewhere between 0.67 and 1.25 staff that organized about 20 volunteers. And we scraped together $10,000 to make it work. The SAMHSA money, the tax dollars, this is a tremendous achievement. I just want to say the amount of services happening now it's amazing. And so everybody in this room, even though I'm here to argue about things that aren't working, that what is working is truly incredible. So great work, everyone. I'm here to kind of build on Terry's comments and talk about the reimbursement process. For those of you who don't know how the business works for a 988 center, we work with the Department of Healthcare Services, and we have a large contract that pays everything we do. In their wisdom, they contract an outside party to reimburse us. Every month we send them a bill, which is what we spend. And they're tremendous, AHP, shout out to them. And then they pay us that money, which gives us the money back for what we spent. And it actually works. And we can pay our employees and our rent and everything. Except for a couple of years ago, it was decided that one line item, a significant one, our technology, specifically our computers, would go through a separate process. So DHCS said, no, you can't bill us for that. You have to bill Cal OES. And so very early on, and this isn't a new thing, this has been going on for over 2 years. There was an initial draft of a process, it was rolled out as the process, it was pulled back. There was a second draft, that was pulled back. Then there was an agreement that NGA would actually buy all our equipment for us. We made these big Christmas lists, sent all that out. Months later, we were told actually that's not the case. And so the current version, has been in development for a while. So very early on, we were like, hey, we got to get our money. That we have to be on this. We studied it. I've literally been on the phone with Kirk for hours and hours over the last 2 years. And we were trying to get pre-approval over 2 years ago, I think about 27 months, I went and did the history, so that we could buy 4 desktops and 5 laptops. 6 months later, it was clear that we couldn't get the pre-approval, but we were clearly told that we wouldn't get reimbursed by DHCS. So we went ahead and on Amazon bought $7,900 worth of equipment. On and on it kind of goes. Finally, we got to the updated one. Kurt knows that we've been talking about this for a long time. It became my personal mission, just for the sport of it, to try to get this money. And we were told, oh, well, you got this. We'll cover you, kind of like grandfathered in. So we were bypassed the approval. Well, it took 4 months to actually confirm that. And we were actually the first call center to get approved. We pulled all.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to truncate your remarks,
Okay.
if you will, please.
All right, sorry, get caught up in the story. Short version is none of the call centers have received any money. 2 of them have been approved to. We were approved on 7/1 the first time for money that has already been expensed 2 fiscal years ago, supplemented by our donors who would be heartbroken to know that they're supplementing the California government. I asked Renee, hey, who do I harass now that you've approved it? No, harass nobody. 4.5 months later, after our approval, I was like, well, what's the deal? And it was explained to me that the check has to be signed by many people and it's mailed from place to place to place to place, and that it will come sometime. So in terms of the data, nobody's ever been paid for any of their technology. What's really going on is people are finding ways to kind of hide that and pay for it in some way because it's not on board. And we really want to recommend that kind of underline what Terry's saying is that really a different process, or if there's some way this money could go through DHCS as well. It's just not working. I understand your system's set up to allocate millions of dollars, and so me trying to get my 7,900 isn't working. So anyway, thank you for your time and hearing that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a concrete example of, I think, what was being described in the work group report out. So that sort of paints a picture for us of what it's like out at one of the actual locations. So thank you, sir. Okay. So, discussion of the working groups that are needed, and so I'm going to open to the board members here. are there work groups that you have identified that we don't have that we could use for a specific purpose? That's sort of the idea here. So,
I think on that part, I think the next item on the agenda, we're going to talk about the rate setting methodology, and then I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not sure that this is the body where that should be done, since we don't determine funding for that's allocated. But I might hand it over to Dr. Bowie from HHS. I don't know if you disagree with me, or Dr. Bowie. So the HHS agency and DHCS, they set the appropriations, so those determinations are made there. But why don't we revisit this after I make my opening comments on the next item?
Thank you.
Could I make one clarification? We don't set appropriations. That's the Department of Finance. We make requests for funding.
I should correct myself. You don't set it, but I will speak to, when I get to the next item, I'm going to talk about the budget process.
Perfect. Okay, so other work groups that the board members have identified, are there any on this side? Any comment on that? Any other comments on work groups from this side? No, okay, thank you. So that would then wrap up agenda item number 5, the working group reports. We will then advance in our agenda to agenda item number 6, which is the 988 surcharge rate setting. I'm going to ask Eric Swanson, who is the Deputy Director of Finance and Logistics Administration at Cal OES. Okay, the person for public comment online, 3 minutes to lodge your public comment. Please proceed.
Hi, yes, I'm Van Hedwall, the Director of San Francisco Suicide Prevention Felton Institute. And just a comment about tracking the implementation of the platform has been very challenging. Only one center is testing the platform despite several years of us all providing feedback about the needs. There are many outstanding questions about the platform and how it will meet our current and future needs. Sometimes we hear from OES that, 988 senders, the need isn't the current scope of possibly the work that NGA is currently doing, despite the fact that Cal OES first introduced the unified platform. They pledged to work collaboratively with the centers to develop such an outstanding product that all centers would want to use it. Can we have a reconciliation of all of the requested items compared to what the current build out includes? Also, when will the platform scope of work or contract be reevaluated? And importantly, will this be a public process that contractors besides NGA 911 can bid on? Will other platforms that already work for 988 in other states or currently now here in this state, which are free from the national administration of 988, be truly fairly considered? How will the new platform take into consideration advances that have been made since initial requirements were collected 3 years ago? Other platforms have made significant gains since the centers provided input 3 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, back to the current agenda items. Surcharge rate setting. I've asked the Deputy Director of Finance and Logistics to join us at the table, and I'll start off with the Chief Deputy Director and the opening remarks for this topic.
Thank you. So much of the public comment was made relevant to this particular item. So before our Deputy Director of Administration kind of goes into how the rate is set, I want to speak more directly. I'm always trying to listen to try to understand the problem. And as I understand the issue is about a concern of the level of resources being allocated out to these crisis centers. I know Dr. Bowie is here on behalf of California Health and Human Services Agency, and also, you know, DHCS is nested under that agency, so you've got the key people here that need to hear that. I will go back, I'm sure she will report back. I will also reach out at my level to make sure that the HHS folks kind of have heard your public comment. You're talking to us at the right time, to the state, as you are aware, because we're developing the budget, right? Every fall, the state budget is under development. The presentation in the agenda item is about how the rate is developed. And so we're going to walk through that, but I want to make clear that the rate is developed, the level of the rate is a function of the appropriation level. So why does that matter? As he walks through kind of the granular detail, the rate setting is really on the back end after the funding level is determined. And so we want to hear you. It's important to be here and have these conversations, but I just want to make sure that that's clear so that you are informed as you're having all these conversations. I do think that we need to be doing a better job at Cal OES and making sure that there's transparency on how this rate is set. We are working, and I would expect probably within the next week, we're going to post online, and it's probably, I think this presentation is responsive and it's going to provide the information, but we're going to put something that's a little more public friendly that kind of warmly walks somebody through with some narrative about this process. But that piece is really important. The appropriation, and so I'm not gonna pretend that, you know, you folks are doing important thing. You're not living in state budgeting and appropriation world, right? The appropriation for this program and every program in the state is decided when for this particular program, our friends at the HHS agency and DHCS are working, I'm sure, with stakeholders. They're going to make a proposal. It's adjudicated, just like every program, it's adjudicated within the executive branch. The governor, typically January 10th, will be proposing Governor Newsom's budget on January 10th. That will be discussed as part of the normal budget process with both the Assembly, the Senate. They will make proposed changes and vote on changes to the governor's proposed budget. And then that budget will go for a vote and then go back to the governor and be enacted by July 1st. That sets the appropriation. We don't even start calculating the rate until we know what that appropriation is. So why this is important is I want to make sure that the timeline is that he's going to describe. I want to underscore the timeline. That the rate that's set per statute is based on this appropriation. So we don't act until we get that appropriation in July. And then I will let him kind of walk through the rest of it. But I think that that's very key. And in terms of coordination, I want you to know that we work very closely with the leadership of HHS, the Department of Finance, and we don't weigh in on the funding levels for the crisis centers. We are on the back end in support of the appropriation. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over. This is the Deputy Director of Administration for Cal OES. And then I think I'll help you underscore a couple of points. And then I think I will, when we post, we will post and we will make sure that our partners at the HHS agency is comfortable with kind of what we're going to put on the website. But we anticipate doing that within the next week. Okay? All right. With that, Deputy Director Swanson.
On here, there we go. I'm Eric Swanson, Deputy Director of Finance and Logistics Administration. And as you know, the 988 program is funded through the State Suicide and Behavioral Crisis Services Fund. And that is, revenue for that fund is a monthly surcharge on phone connections, be it landlines, cell phones, or any other kind of phone line. Cal OES uses a process set in statute to determine the surcharge rates for both the 911 and 988 system. The methodology takes the approved expenditures included in the final Budget Act and subtracts any fund balance remaining from the prior year to get the amount needed to be collected in revenue. Cal OES then takes the number of phone lines submitted by the phone providers and multiplies it by the proposed surcharge, adjusting the surcharge until the amount of revenue generated is sufficient to cover the amount of revenue needed. We identify a sufficient fund balance, and generally, when we've talked to the Department of Finance, that's about 10% of annual expenditures, and we adjust the surcharge to cover that needed balance. The expenditures approved in the annual budget are the basis for the surcharge calculation methodology. This methodology does not take into account any proposed program augmentations that have not been approved through the state's budget process. Once a program augmentation has been approved in the state budget, which is starting July 1st, the newly approved expenditure amount will be used to adjust the monthly surcharge starting in the next calendar year, January 1st of the next calendar year. And any fund balance will carry over to the next year from the fund condition statement and be used to adjust next year's rate. Steve, if you want to, so this is sort of the calculation we used using those, the data I just described to come up with the surcharge for calendar year 2026. But if you want to advance the next slide, I can show you, this is the actual fund condition statement, which is on the Department of Finance's website with each update of the budget, including the final Budget Act. We use the data elements I described to come up with this methodology to come up with the surcharge amount.
Can I just add here? So this is a public document. Every special fund in the state of California has a fund condition. And so when the governor's budget is released in January, what you're going to see is those fiscal years at the top change. It'll be 24, 25, 25, 26, and then 26, 27 in that right-hand column. That 26, 27 is what's being developed right now, right, within the executive branch. So that will be a fund condition based on whatever if there is, whatever the proposed appropriation level is in the governor's budget for this program, that fund condition will reflect that.
Right. And if you, as you can see, it's pretty hard to see on the screen there, but if you, each of the departments that spend out of this fund has an appropriation level that's listed below from the final Budget Act. But let me take a minute to talk a little bit about Cal OES expenditures in this area. If we can turn to the next slide here, Steve. So under current law, Cal OES is responsible for the call handling equipment system of the 988 system. We have implemented a system that is designed to provide software for cloud-native call processing equipment for the 11 Lifeline crisis centers in California. And this technology supports interoperability between 988 and 911. Cal OES has 14 positions responsible for 988 integration and support. As you can see from this chart, our spending has been significantly less than authorized in the state budget for 988 implementation. But any amounts not spent from the approved budget are returned to the fund and made available for future program spending. And the leftover funding appears as a fund balance when we set the next 988 surcharge. We are working with the Department of Finance to look at our budget level authority going forward. There's a lot that's still to do in this area, so we need to account for that, but we also, our spending has been less than what we were previously anticipating as well.
So on this part, let me just kind of underscore. So the fund condition that we just went through is more about, it's the budget, right? These are actual expenditures. So I'm going to kind of underscore with what Eric just shared. I think the key thing here is that these are actual expenditures. And so as part of the normal budget process this year, we are having conversations about should we change our appropriation level? So we're taking a look at what we anticipate our expenditures are going to be for the next fiscal year. And if necessary, we may adjust that appropriation amount. Now, that won't affect the rates because currently that column all the way to the right is the difference. So that's the amount of money, funds, that were returned to the fund because they were unspent. Not returned to Cal OES to spend for other things, but returned to the fund, and it contributed to a fund balance in the fund, which then played into the reduction for the need for a rate increase. So while kind of taking a look at our appropriation, and if we decide that we need to reduce our appropriation, it will have no bearing on the rate, but it's just a good governance thing to do. And so I think we've been at this for a few years. We have a better sense of what the appropriation level will be. But that's not something that we do just within Cal OES. That would be a budget action. Probably it would require, the public budget action and discussion with the legislature and adoption as part of the July 1st. So part of the normal budget process.
I'm not an expert on the spending on the expenditure authority on the health side, but I did want to note that our friends at DHCS started off with a $20 million SAMHSA mental health block grant as a one-time investment for 988 network capacity building. And then they received a SAMHSA grant. And then DHCS was awarded $4 million for local assistance and a one-time allocation for $15 million in 2023-24. In 2024-25, there's an annual allocation of about $12.5 million for local assistance for the state Suicide and Behavioral Health Crisis Service Fund. And then last year, on a one-time basis, there was a proposal for $17.5 million that was braided with other funding sources to meet the staffing and operational needs of the 988 centers, including SAMHSA funds and community mental health block grant set-asides. And any future needs, as Lisa said, any future needs of the program will go through the state's budget process, and approved resources will be factored into the next surcharge allocation. And I apologize, it's hard to talk about methodology in the middle of a task force meeting, but appreciate the time to talk about that a little bit.
Dr. Bowie, I know that we kind of covered the Health and Human Services and DHCS budget piece. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Those were covered already. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any questions from the board on that presentation? Yes, Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you for the explanation. It helps us understand more about the appropriation process as well as the difference, how that's going to be reallocated, if you will. I mean, and this is very high level presentation, which we appreciate. But for those of us who would like to understand a bit more, is there, in the future for presentation, is there a way to be able to have a broken down, for example, on the total expenditure, how the money is being allocated or spent and so on, so that we understand more about the operations side? Would that be possible?
I think we can do that. Are you talking about the entire fund? And
for example, in year 2025, you have total expenditure of like $3 million or
yes.
something like, yeah. So probably help us understand more about, how.
Sure.
the broken down of how that was being spent and things like that.
Yeah, I think we can do that. And one thing to note is that 2025 year is a little bit skewed because we're just starting the year, so it doesn't reflect a full year of spending yet.
I have a comment or question, actually. So I see, and I think that it was mentioned that there's been underspending from Cal OES. And we've had so many questions about the platform and the development of the platform and what will be included, and whether or not it should be some revision or looking at the existing statement of work and whether what we've planned for 3 years ago is meeting what we're going to need this next year. And I'm just curious, it seems that there's certainly money for us to have these conversations and make sure we're ending up with the platform that we really need today. And I've had a hard time. I came in after this process had already started. I've been here about 2 years, but the process predates me. But really trying to understand whether or not, one, we're going to get the product we want. And it seems if it is a matter of funding, there is certainly funding available for us to be very current. So I would like a little more clarity on that.
I'll take a crack at that. Yes, the lack of funding has not been an issue. If we, as we're developing the budget right now for the governor's budget for January, if as part of this process we think that there needs to be a change that might increase the need for funding, then that would be reflected in the January or possibly spring budget proposal. But that would be a discussion item. I think our commitment to you is that the next meeting is in February. The next meeting in February, there will at that point be a public governor's budget proposal, and we can come back and make sure that this is an agenda item so we can talk about what the proposal is for the fund and what that includes relative to program implementation.
Okay. Will we be looking, is there a place where we can look at the current contract that we have for the platform and understand whether or not, as it's written or as it's funded or where we're at with it, is going to meet our needs?
Yeah, well, the contract, as with all contracts, is a public document and available, I think, on a website, a government website. We can get that information to you. Likewise, we have a copy of the document that Kurt, I think, can share to go over what the statement of work is in there. And specifically, I think your point is the technical requirements. So yeah, that's not proprietary or secret information. I think what we'll find is that it probably is a summary of what all of the business requirements were through that process where they were gathered. As I understand, there was a period of time where the team went and had conversations with each of the areas to gather what the need was so that we could then write the statement of work to match that need. So that's my expectation of what has happened. When it comes to, you know, I think the question was raised earlier, does that still match what is currently needed? And, you know, updating a statement of work for a contract that's in flight right now is a challenge. You know, if there's an amendment process, obviously, that needs to go on. So some thought would need to go into that, but it's not impossible. And so the idea here is that we should be collecting requirements based on the technologies that are available now and the needs that are out in the operating theater. And those two should match up. As the needs change or the technology changes, then that opportunity to revisit and amend is available for that purpose. Which I think leads me to another point in all of this, and it kind of aligns with the conversation we were having earlier about the fact that there really is no finish line to a lot of these things. Technology is one of these areas where it is ever changing. And so even if we produced and delivered a product today, that would just mean that we immediately begin starting to figure out what gaps still remain and what should be in the follow-on to that, so that, because there will always be maintenance and operations of the current system, but if there's new feature development that needs to happen to the system, then that's an ongoing workload that should be done, so that we never end up in a situation where we're 10 or 12 years behind what is possible and what's needed. So my challenge to the program here is that we need to make sure that we are a good strategic partner for all of the centers, knowing and engaging with them what inputs they have into the need that exists and how that differs from the product we currently have, so that we can be responsive to changes in both the actions you all take, but then the technology that's available. So I hope that's kind of a long-winded way of talking about my philosophy on information systems, but I think it directly ties to what you're asking about.
It does. One of the things from the working group that is one of our outstanding agenda items is actually to reconcile all of the feedback that has been provided with what is being delivered, so that we can see where we have landed. I think that that's really important, and so that is an outstanding agenda item. I think Kurt is going to help us with that.
Right.
I'd like to make a comment or perhaps ask some questions. First of all, Lisa and Steve, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for trying to help us to understand this process. You said that we're busy doing the work, we're not following what's happening in the state budgets. We've been trying. We have had 988 for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years next year. And we have all been desperately trying to understand this process. And we're pretty smart people for the most part, and we haven't been able to figure it out. So I'm going to ask some really pointed and direct questions right now. And they're in partnership. I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And so when I ask these questions, I'm not trying to point a finger at anybody. I think everybody's trying to do the best job that they can do. But I've sat on the lines with people who are concerned that their children might try to kill themselves this very moment. They're worried about their friends, their family members. We're in a tough place right now in our country, and we know that California is not answering all of the cries for help that are coming into the system. And yet we're watching this situation. It's kind of like who's on first. We're watching this situation where more money is going to Cal OES from the surcharge than is going to the centers. Yet the centers really have not received any benefits of the support of what we're supposed to be getting from Cal OES. We still don't have a platform. We can't get our money when we're trying to get paid for the technology. When we ask questions like meetings are canceled, people don't show up, and we're not really sure where to go. I hear you saying that you guys aren't in charge of the appropriation. And so then I'm going to ask the larger group, maybe on two or others, well, who is in charge? Because who would make a decision to not give money to support people in crisis when money is sitting there for a technology that's not even being used? I don't know how to put all this together in my mind, and so I'd love someone to help me through this.
So before I hand it over to Dr. Bowie, let me kind of take a crack at this. So you're talking, this is an issue to be passionate about. You've got two state agencies here. You've got Cal OES, you've got the Health and Human Services Agency. So you've got the two right agencies. Cal OES merely sets the rate. I think making sure that folks are informed and understand the funding pressures is an important thing to do, particularly this time of year as the budget is being developed. So that part is key. But you asked something specific. I've just kind of blanked on your specific question. You had a specific question.
I guess what I'm asking specifically.
I remember, I'm sorry. You asked specifically, you were kind of talking about I think what I'm understanding the question to be is who makes these decisions about how much goes to each of the agencies. Can you pull that fund condition up, please? Or can you go back to the fund condition? So here's the fund. And so these state agencies, the Health and Human Services, Cal OES, Healthcare Services, I'm using the wrong glasses, tax and fee. So those are the folks, and those amounts are determined by that state budget on July 1st. So when you talk about who, that will be which agency gets which amount of funding will be proposed as part of that January budget. It's not finalized and becoming a part of the Budget Act until July 1st. So that's very intentional. And why I say that, people build whole careers on learning the state budget, right? So I don't expect anybody here to be state budget experts. So that's why I want to kind of make these points here, right? So the governor's budget will make a proposal. It'll be discussed before both houses, and I assume stakeholders will be engaged through that process. And on July 1st, that Budget Act will be very specific about how much funding comes out of this fund for each agency. Does that answer your question? And the reason that you see me kind of, making sure that I'm deferring a bit to Dr. Bowie so she can speak. The Health and Human Services Agency is the agency under which the delivery of the services, the people side of this, and how funding is allocated through their appropriation out to the service centers. So I don't want to speak for them, but there's a difference between our HHS friends as far as being a state agency being part of this board, and then also Cal OES is also a state agency. So we are part of kind of that state budget process. Is that helpful?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm understanding the process a little bit more. I'm still unclear. I think I hear you pointing to the next budget cycle, and yet for me, I'm wondering, we've been saying this for years.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm still uncertain how or why we're even at this place right now. And just not clear. We're putting a lot of pressure on you right now because it's the only place that we know to go with our voice. And so and we've been trying to do that for years, that pressure's not working. So we need to figure out where we do need to go. And I guess I'm just not sure how or why this message hasn't been heard up until now.
I think I would encourage you to just keep being part of the communication process as a stakeholder, particularly the program. I can't speak to, I'm definitely talking, our rate is kind of for the go forward. Sure. But I think what you folks are also really interested in is the development of the current budget, right? In terms of why you feel that that whatever communication you've had hasn't yielded your desired result, I don't know. I can't speak to that, but hopefully kind of describing the process and all of the key points help you feel informed on how you can be more impactful in that process.
Thank you.
And we will also go back and, it's our intent to have kind of this more thoughtful conversation about how the rate is set. And we will take this and think about that. Hopefully putting our methodology on the website is also helpful. But I thought that it was important to make sure that we're not just answering the question or speaking specifically to the agenda item and answering the question that was asked, but really kind of speaking to kind of the broader issue that stakeholders have raised about the desire for funding.
I could offer some clarification. I'm still learning about the state budget process 4 years now into the state, so it is difficult to understand. But one thing I do want to highlight, and thank you, Eric, for explaining some of the items. So while July 2022 was the implementation of 988 nationwide, DHCS has historically been the department at the state that has helped fund the 988, previously called the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. for several years through primarily the Mental Health Services Act, about $4 million a year. But there's also been other funding that the state has braided to support the 9/8 centers. And as I understand, local 9/8 centers have also braided a variety of sources of funding. So one of the key thing about AB 988 is that it's the beginning of the state stepping up to have a dedicated source of funding to support 988 as well as related mobile crisis services. So I think that's a really great step in the right direction. But I suspect it's going to take us some time to get there and find out what is the right thing to do, because we're doing both things. DHCS designated mental health block grant money, $20 million, as Eric mentioned, but also $14.4 million from SAMHSA, and then subsequently got a 3-year grant of $20 million per year from SAMHSA, which is ending. So the key part to understand is that federal funding is starting to end, as well as changes coming from the county funding process because of other kinds of state behavioral health initiatives that are coming up. So I think we're in a place where the state has to sit down and evaluate where we are at with the system and what are the needs. One of the nice things I'm learning about is that it's not just a Jan budget, but there's a May revise process that allows us to take into account what we didn't account for. So in those 2 years that you can see in 23 and 24, the $19 million was from a May revise process, because for that fiscal year, DHCS was allocated $4 million only for local assistance to the 9/8 center, but because it was seen that we needed more money, the May revise provided a one-time $15 million allocation to make sure everything, is made whole for that year. Right now, there is an ongoing allocation annually of $12.5 million for local assistance for DHCS to go to the 9/8 center. So there was an additional May revise that was done. Oh, well, I guess it was just this year, but it feels like, my goodness, a lot of work goes into this. So we got an additional $17.5 million one-time allocation, again, to make whole. But that's not the entire budget to support 9/8 centers. DHCS was also able to pull from community mental health block grant crisis set aside in order to meet the funding needs that is being seen. So there's lots of things that we're constantly doing. And at this point, DHCS has reported to me that we have currently adequate funding for this fiscal year, knowing, of course, there's constant increasing volume, right, because of natural awareness and public awareness from 9/8, as well as changing funding needs. So we've got the Jan budget come up, but we also have a May revise coming up so that we can constantly look at what the needs are and make sure that we meet every need during the fiscal year.
Dr. Bowie, you opened by saying that you're not a budget expert and you've only been doing this for 4 years, but you pointed out something very important that I failed to point out. So let me underscore what she's saying here is that this fund condition is only for the state suicide and behavioral health crisis fund. So it doesn't give you a comprehensive view of the funding that's provided for the centers. It's only this particular fund because it's the fund that Cal OES adjusts the rate for. So it doesn't give you the full funding, but thank you for Dr. Bowie for clarifying that.
Good discussion. I just had one question, and I think maybe Dr. Bowie, it might go to you actually. So we're here in the technical advisory board, but there's also a counterpart set of meetings that happen that HHS sponsors, and I think could you talk a little bit about that and how it would pertain to the programmatic areas? So that's the January, and I think it's coming up January and April. So maybe that would just help paint the picture a little bit more.
So let's see. As many of you have participated, Cal HHS had a 9/8 crisis policy advisory group, which made recommendations toward a 5-year implementation plan, which we then submitted to the state legislature earlier this year in January. Cal HHS plans to reconvene the policy advisory group January 28th and April 29th in order to continue the work. Because in addition to submitting the implementation plan, Cal HGS has a responsibility to report on the progress of AB 98 implementation at least every year. So we plan to retain and solicit feedback as well as input from all of our community partners and the advisory group toward that work. So look forward to seeing many of you there.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So
I have one more comment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So that was a lot of information, and I'm not really sure that we got to a conclusion that really makes me feel satisfied that we're going to have the needs met of the people in crisis in the state of California. And so I just want to just make one more comment, which is that, you know, we know two things. We know that we don't have enough to meet the needs of the people that are using this service in this very moment. And we know that volume is only going up. We also know that we have a lot of directives from a 5-year state plan that we haven't even taken a look at yet. And so it is obvious that more money needs to be put into this system to sustain it. And I know that all the braided funding is complicated, but I just want to go on record saying that what is there is not sufficient. And I'm really concerned. I know it's already been done, and I know it's based on appropriations. I've heard that. But I'm really concerned that decreasing a rate sets the public perception. It lets people think that this system is fully funded. As a matter of fact, it's so funded that we can lower the rate. And that's not the case. And I just think that that puts us in a really precarious place when we're trying to build a system that meets the needs of people in California.
all right, thank you for that. Any comments from the board before we close out the agenda item on setting the rates?
I would just like to agree fully with what Sherry just said from the center perspective. I'd like to go on record as saying it, we do not feel that we're fully funded or the need is met at all.
All right, thank you. Seeing as how we had the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting for the items on the agenda, then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. So thank you.
Normally we're allowed to provide public comment after the section of the agenda. That's historically what happens every single item.
Our current agenda reflects that you can make public comment at the beginning of the meeting for items that are on the agenda. We held that public comment period. Many members, especially those that are in this room, made public comment at that time on varying items.
So how does one respond to what's being discussed here on an agenda item prior to it being discussed? So now comments have been made and shared and discussed, and now the public is not allowed to ask a question. That doesn't seem like
Every single technical advisory board meeting, the public is allowed to comment after section of the agenda.
it says that on the agenda.
Okay, look, I'll make this point, all right, is public comment is different than question and answer session. So I think, and I am sensitive to the fact that historically things have been conducted a certain way, okay? So what I'll do to bridge this gap is I will allow you to make a public comment this time with the understanding that we're not going to operate the meeting the way we have historically done it going forward. So I will concede a point here to allow you to engage in the dialogue because that was your expectation, but I want to set the expectation going forward that isn't always going to be the case. So we'll thank Mr. Swanson for his input into the conversation today, and we'll have you step up to the microphone.
I'd also like to point out that you can always submit public comment via email. That's also available in the agenda, and that can be circulated to the board members following any discussion, just for your information.
So again, Matt Taylor, Senior Director of Crisis Line Operations at D.D. Hirsch. There is a real problem here, and I really appreciate this notion of explaining the funding situation more thoroughly. What is on the screen is the latest fund condition statement. It makes it look like the California Department of Healthcare Services is getting quite a bit of money on this. This is a one-time appropriation from the governor's office, not guaranteed to be sustained. That was for $17.5 million. On the OES website, there are 10 records of public meetings that have fund condition statements in it. And what you'll see in all those historical fund condition statements is that OES is being allocated more of the AB 988 funds as far as a baseline funding starting point than the 988 centers are through DHCS. So back to Sherry's question, somebody is making a decision somewhere that at a baseline starting point, OES gets more 988 surcharge funds revenues than the 988 centers do. That's a problem. And the only reason why there's excess funds right now is because OES hasn't been able to spend your allocations in a timely and appropriate manner. So there's a real problem that the public can perceive, as Sherry said, that 988 doesn't need as much money as is being allocated. Well, we do. Those of us on the front lines need it. And this also sends a message to the country from California, the largest state, with the greatest opportunity to sustain 988 through the funding, through the surcharge revenues, that 988 is not an expensive service. That is not true. It's a very expensive service on the front line. OES shouldn't be at the starting point being allocated more money from baseline funding from the AB 988 fees than the centers and DHCSs. So somebody's making that decision, and somebody from OES is submitting a budget on the front end that suggests you need a lot of money. That needs to change.
Thank you. Okay, that closes out that agenda item. And we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the Cal OES 988 updates. I'll ask my senior engineer to join me up at the microphone in the event that we need some technical explanations given. But I'll start out by giving some information about how things stand right now. So on the projects in operational review front, start with our network. Our system, with our system vendor, we've deployed network infrastructure to each of the 11 call centers. And that includes backroom server racks and equipment, establishing network ingress points, connectivity to the network cloud, and circuit provisioning to manage traffic across the network. And that creates sort of a transportation layer for data packets associated with a call to be properly routed based on where the call is coming from and where it needs to end up. And also to establish that connectivity so that we could potentially transfer calls to and from the 911 system. As concerns the call handling system and the customer relationship management portion of that, through a partnership with our system vendor, we've developed the cloud call handling system and relationship management framework, or system rather. And so these systems provide the ability to manage the client information and document the 988 call interactions for the existing Lifeline crisis centers. This solution is in a 60-day pilot evaluation phase at the Buckalew Center. And currently, the Buckalew Center is successfully receiving calls, validating interoperability with the NextGen 911 platform. The interface process here and concerning the interface, the milestones, and the statewide contract, and this is really at the heart of the interoperability portion of the discussion. We've validated voice interoperability between the 988 and the 911 systems for legacy 911 system traffic. These calls are transferred through an analog interface and rely on the call taker dialing a 10-digit number to reach the public safety answering point. Next generation 911 call routing has been validated in the lab and is currently being evaluated in the live environment at the Buckaloo Call Center under that 60-day pilot. Now, it's worth noting here that the relationship that allows these calls to come through relies on this memorandum of understanding with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And we've been working to establish an MOU, that's the memorandum of understanding, with them. And so recently, our legal has been engaged with their staff to work out and put some final touches on a document which we believe will be ready to enter into agreement by the parties. That document getting signed and put in place would open the door to then allow onboarding other call centers other than the Buckaloo Center, which is in a pilot phase. There was an agreement made where, for the purposes of a pilot, they would allow the transfer of information. But beyond a pilot, we needed to have this MOU in place. And so this MOU is being worked on, and we anticipate that we should be able to reach the finish line on that MOU, opening the door for the possibility to then expand to other call centers. So that's sort of the status and update from the 988 program here, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts and contributions to that discussion topic from the board member.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. Thank you for the update, Steve. It's helpful. You know, we had a question earlier about how will the system take into consideration all the things that may have progressed technologically or otherwise over the last 3 years. And, you know, there'd been some confusion about this system from the get-go. You know, when it was first proposed, it was proposed with the idea that it was going to be the best system ever, and it was going to give us everything we needed to be the best 988 call centers that we could be. We haven't seen a lot of evidence of that, and so I guess I'm just curious. All of a sudden, then it was a requirement that we had to be on the system, and so I guess I'm just curious, how will centers be able to ensure that this system is indeed the best system that meets all of our needs before we're required to join it?
Yeah, good question. I am not familiar with the requirement part of that statement, and so that's going to be something I'm going to have to go back and familiarize myself with. And I don't know, was that a requirement that came out of this office? Or
it's a good question, Steve, because I think we've had a challenge trying to get a clear answer to that as well.
Okay.
I think at times it had been presented that it was a choice. At other times it was presented that it was required. I'm not sure if going on this system is the requirement or just being on a combined system is the requirement. I'm not entirely sure. It looks like maybe On2 has some thoughts. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you have information that would help us?
Yes, I can provide some context, knowing, of course, things have maybe changed and progressed. There was a point earlier this year, I believe around March or April, where SAMHSA and Vibrant reached out to state agencies, that's Cal HHS, Cal OES, and DHCS, asking for clarification, because their understanding in working on this statewide platform from California was that the 988 centers will be required to be on one platform. So we had at least 1 or 2 meetings with them, and we co-developed a document that said what the expectations are of developing this platform. And I believe that DHCS and AHP put into the contract and that the 9 centers will be using a statewide platform. I can't remember the exact wording, but once it is operational, or you probably know better than I what it says, but SAMHSA and Vibrant really needed that guarantee from the state entities in order to continue with this MOU relationship and piloting the platform. So that's where we were at back in April with that document. But, all these are kind of, changing situations, so we may need to revisit and discuss with them again at some point.
Yeah, thank you for that context. I think, figuring out where some of these ideas originated and whether or not they have force and effect in statute or something formal like that, or if it was just a policy decision that was made on the development of the system. I think, when we talk about the MOU and sending calls to a certain location, we certainly have the ability to parse out which ones to send and which ones not to route to locations. And I think that's being demonstrated here, is that we can say this particular call center wants to have the traffic routed to the statewide system before being handed to them. So that, at least from a technology standpoint, implies to me that it isn't a mandate that all or nothing must go. So it bears some investigation, and I think I'll take that back as an action item to find out on that particular point whether or not that is a requirement or whether it's just a preference. So, and then, it kind of goes into the whole conversation about what the requirements are from a business requirement standpoint or a legislative requirement standpoint. So, I would want to understand what exactly, and again, it goes to the point about what's in the contract. And so we understand what the requirements are, what's in the contract, and what the concept was for representing something as a requirement or a mandate. So we'll get that ironed out. But, I think there is, work being done here that, while not, resolving a lot of the issues that are being brought up that you're experiencing already, it hasn't essentially, made the sweeping change for you that you're anticipating. I think work is and we're advancing on that goal. And so I think that was kind of the update I wanted to, or at least the thrust of the update was to say, yeah, there is work being done. We're advancing towards the goal. And my commitment to this group is that we're going to continue to advance. And it's my expectation that we will be able to articulate, what our rate of advancement can be expected to be.
And also that we're advancing towards a common goal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to, substitute my judgment for what actually the experts on the front lines would want. So that should never, be the case as far as us and our development goes. I wouldn't want to put myself in that spot because I don't think that we're the ones who are best suited to answer that question.
Great.
Do we expect the MOU to be signed this year?
Referring to 2025?
Yes.
It's hard to say. Obviously there's, two parties to the agreement. I think we're on the precipice of being able to send a revision back to the other party, and how they respond to that is an open question that I don't think I can answer. But my expectation is that the obstacles are getting fewer and fewer. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it could be done this year, but I just wouldn't want to commit to it being done this year, knowing that I don't have it in my control to make that happen 100%. But there will be more engagement this year, and with the goal of removing what obstacles remain.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments from the board?
Is there any timeline for implementation once the MOU is signed to getting the call handling in the centers?
So no, there's no specific timeline, and I think one of the reasons for that has to do with I don't want the team to be dictating terms to the sites themselves. And so I would suggest that it has to be a discussion in partnership with each of the locations, what makes sense for them.
When does the contract expire for the call handling that they sign with the state? Isn't it the end of this year?
So yeah, the current contract expires New Year's Eve of this year. But the contract has built into it opportunities to extend without having to establish a new contract. And
How
so
will
those,
decisions about that be made?
well, one of the main driving points of that is to not allow ourselves to end up in a situation where we're out of contract and have no provider whatsoever. And so I think having a contract in place is better than not having one in place. And with that in mind, it would seem to suggest that extending would be a prudent course of action.
Help me understand why having a contract in place is better than not?
If we want to evaluate the product and potentially roll it out to other locations, then that would need to be done under the contract. And so if it expires, we no longer have the opportunity to deploy it. So, I mean, it's kind of like, you and if you want to deploy the product and evaluate it in places and potentially transition over to that as the system, the flagship system in place, then it would have to be under the terms of a contract.
So from my understanding, kind of the last few months were supposed to be like an informal process of us evaluating the product to determine whether or not the contract would be extended and if it was meeting our needs. And I'm not aware of what the results of that were.
Of the informal evaluation period?
Yeah, that's what we had been told, that our work was to provide feedback and to see if this product was the product that we needed. And it's just curious to me that, instead of, taking into consideration the feedback that we've been given and the lack of communication that we've been given about it, that the platform in its current state with the current vendor is just, being extended when we've already experienced challenges with it. And so I guess I'm just curious, if there's a more formal process for us to determine whether or not we might put that out to bid for other vendors.
Well, extending one contract doesn't mean that you're foreclosing the possibility of opening another solicitation to another vendor. So, for example, if I, am driving my car and I'm with one insurance provider, it doesn't mean that I can't shop for another insurance provider and line up a time where I transition to that other provider. So I don't think that is necessarily an obstacle or showstopper. Now, it sounds like you've provided some input on the current provider, and from the discussion, it sounds like your expectation based on that input that you provided was that this contract would end and go away.
No, that wasn't my expectation. I guess the expectation was that we would provide feedback and then, have some return information about what was the process going to be, the next step going to be. So I guess, I would recommend, I'd perhaps even make a formal resolution that we have some sort of public process where it's clear to the centers and to everyone, how will we make a determination if this system is meeting the needs, and when will we say, okay, it's not, let's do something else, or it is, but right now it's been going on for 3 years and we just keep kind of getting drug along.
Yes, please.
I mean, thank you. I totally understand, there's a contracting process, contract management contracting process that OES probably would need to continue or abide by. And I guess there is also a contract evaluation process to determine should it continue or should it go to RFP, and then while, even if we determine that it has to go through an RFP, we still need to have this contract in place so that when determined to release it, there's a continuation of services and things like that. And also, it sounds like there is a process where 988 centers was able to provide input to see whether the current vendor or platform is really working or not, and have that input being part of the contract evaluation with the current vendors. And so I guess that's probably is a missing part where 988 centers might not be informed of, where we are with that, as far as whether the input from 988 center being taken into consideration of continuing the contract or not. I think that's a missing part, and you probably get what I'm talking about. So to the extent you can comment on that, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think where it gets to be sticky is with the expiration of the contract coming up, and where we're at. I mean, we're looking at 3-4 weeks before the expiration happens, and again, I don't want to end up in a situation where we don't have the ability to use the platform because the contract expired, but we also don't have another one in place. So to me, at minimum, to mitigate risk of not having the ability to use the platform at all, then we have to remain in contract at least until we have another one in place, another option. Otherwise, we go back to the way things were before the development process started. And so, when you look at it from that vantage point, it's not a final decision that we're going to go with this particular product and stick with it forever. And it's just leaving open the possibility while we continue the evaluation process and take the input necessary from the people on the front line who have to be using this system. And if it doesn't meet the needs, then I would expect there to be a documentation of where it falls short, and that could then be an input into and inform the process going forward of what shortcomings this system had that a future system needs to have, or something along those lines. And so that's kind of how I'm viewing it, is we want to maintain our options while we continue to evaluate. And I see.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how long an extension is and how many times we can extend.
Okay.
And then I do want to just mention that there are several centers who have developed platforms in this time frame that we've been able to preview, and they're incredibly happy with it and seems to be meeting a lot of our needs. And then we know that Vibrant also has a platform that they have built out. So I'm just wondering how to actually kind of move through finding out all of this information, not only from our feedback that I understand has been given very generously for the 3 years, but comparing it to things that people are using that they really are having a good experience with also. Is that the center's responsibility? Is that Cal OES to help us reconcile all of this? What would the actual steps be? But first, how many times can we extend?
Yeah, so the number of times possible to extend under this current contract is 2. Each of those extensions is valid for 2 years. So there's 4 years of runway in front of us, should we elect to exercise both options. In terms of how do we evaluate the need? So, in a prior life, I would employ the services of what's called a business analyst to gather and compile use cases and user experiences to inform what the system would require. It sounds like there's other options available that don't require us to actually engage with any vendor to develop them because they exist in the marketplace right now. And so comparing a homegrown developed solution with solutions that are available on the open market is something that, finding out all of the business requirements from the frontline users and comparing that with the options that are available. And if none of them are a good enough fit for that set of requirements, then you build something custom to address all of those requirements. And I don't know if this is what I'm hearing, but it's entirely possible that there's a solution available off the shelf somewhere that would meet the needs of some or all of the centers. And if that's the case, I mean, that to me is one argument why a mandated solution doesn't make sense, is why would we constrain people from choice if the outcome is they're getting something that has fewer features or ease of use than what they could get by buying a commercially available off-the-shelf product. So all of that taken together sounds to me like we're not at a place to be able to come to a final decision on what the course should be. There's more work that would need to go in that, which I think is a second part of your question. So how do we do that? Well, I would suggest that it's probably a work group that would need to be convened to evaluate what the offerings on the market are and compare those with the features and functionality that serve as the business requirements for the end users who will be using the product. And so once that comparison is made, then a recommendation could be made that, here are 3 that make sense. And a center is able to choose from among those. And it looks like your finger is on the button.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a clarification question. So, so we talk about these, that there's 2-year extensions, but a 2-year extension doesn't require that we are with a vendor for 2 years. I'm assuming that there's likely a 30-day clause, so
Correct.
that if we want to change paths, we can do that well before the 2 years.
Yes, that's correct. And thank you for raising that nuance of procurement and contracting. Yes, there's always an opportunity. It doesn't mean you're locked in for that 2-year or 4-year period of time. There's an opportunity to then pivot. And that's, I think, kind of what I was alluding to with my analogy to car insurance is I can always shop for a better product and, give notice to my current supplier and switch to another one that makes more sense, particularly if the one that I have right now isn't providing the features and functionality that I've determined that I need, because the marketplace always lags a little bit behind what technology is available. So
I'd just like to go back to the motion that I previously mentioned, which is that I think we need to create a defined process that does not go for 2 years. A 5-year runway for a system is a very long and ridiculous runway. And so I would like to propose that perhaps in the next 3 months, we convene this group, this interactive group, where we're looking at all of the options and making a decision what is going to happen with this platform.
So I hear that motion, and as I understand it, it is evaluating features and functionality as well as determining on what basis we will render a decision as to whether something suits the purpose or not.
Yes.
Right. And so the motion, as I understand it, would be over the next 3 months, we would convene, perform the analysis, and have that work group report out to us of the findings from that, which would essentially take the form of, here is a proposed way of evaluating and making a determination.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a procedural question. Do we need a second before we can have a comment on that?
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
All right. We have a motion on the table.
And then I have a comment. Might Cal OES be able to hire that person that you said that I don't remember the position you said, but in general, you said there's a
Business
position,
analyst.
Yeah.
yes, to do that for us or work with us.
Yeah, I will definitely investigate that point. I'm not aware of something right now that says yes or no, but more importantly, I don't see something that is a complete showstopper on that. So that's an action item that we'll take back. And, you know, I think we're happy to help, obviously, with the compiling and formatting and making it, you know, into a document. So it's, I think this is the way systems should be developed. It's, you know, in the information technology world, this would be what we call a joint application development cycle, where you get the stakeholders together and take that input to make sure that the end product reflects their needs. And so I think that collaborative type approach is something that we should model here in this venue. And as we go forward, I think it will turn into a situation where it feels a lot more like you're having a voice in what is happening. Because, you know, what I've heard here today is a lot of references to, we provided input, but then the outcome didn't reflect our input, or we don't feel like we've had a seat at the table. And so I think in doing it that way, then it makes everybody have who has a stake in the outcome also have a voice in the outcome. So I think, so we have a motion on the table that I think we should vote on, which is to establish a group that will perform the task of evaluating requirements for the system, options that are available to serve those requirements, and then a basis by which we can decide whether a solution meets those requirements or not. And so with that, I think we will proceed to the vote by taking roll call, and you lodging your vote by saying either in favor or opposed to the motion. And so I'll start the roll call now. Dr. Bowie, in favor or opposed?
In favor.
Right. Sherry Sinwelski.
In favor.
Diana Gutierrez.
In favor.
Ametria Sidney.
In favor.
Jeff Aber. Absent. Jennifer Kenton.
Agree. What am I supposed to say?
In
I'm
favor.
sorry. In favor, yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Rafla Yuan.
In favor.
Lan Nguyen.
In favor.
Joe Sullivan.
In favor.
Terry Galvin.
In favor.
Jamila Fields.
In favor.
Right. I perceive that we have a unanimous agreement that the motion carries. So therefore, we will move that forward accordingly. All right. Any other input from the board on that agenda item? All right. Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is the California Health and Human Services updates. Yeah. Here we go. Stand by. Is there a slide? Do we have the slides that were submitted? Uh-oh. Yeah. Do you have them available to email? From Stephanie Welch? My apologies. We'll get it sorted here. Right. Those are on their way over to you. As soon as you get them, if you could, they'll have to be scanned by our enterprise security application, so that may take as much as 120 seconds to perform. Thank you for your patience. My apologies. While we're waiting, why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break if anybody wants to step aside, and we'll reestablish our presence here in 5 minutes from now. Thank you. All right, thank you. That concludes the 5-minute intermission. Thank you for your patience. We've got the technical difficulties ironed out, and with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Bowie for her presentation.
Hello there, this is Auntie Bui from Cal HHS. I'm going to go through, I know we're very much over time and some folks have to leave, so just going to give you a quick update on the 98 centers, some highlights about the project, some FYI for the next Prop 1 kind of work that will impact 98 communication and what we're doing in the coming year. So just as a summary, you may not know all of this, and just as a reminder, all the state investment over the past few years has really resulted in us having over 1,100 crisis counselors at 11 California 98 centers. The majority are now paid staff as opposed to volunteers. We've heard that how call volume has increased over the years, and we are on track this year to answering about 500,000 calls if the state rate remains steady, and we are at an 89% in-state answer rate for phone calls to 988. We've been working really hard to increase chat and text capacity by supporting the 98 centers to ramp up staffing. So thus far, we are at 42% in-state answer rate for chat and text. More work to be done, right, to get to that 80% benchmark. But we are up from 27% in-state chat and text a year ago. And the reason why it's important to keep the contact answer within the state is to make sure that we connect help seekers to local resources. Okay. So in terms of some quick project highlight, I want to remind you, I spoke about this last time, but the National 98 Specialized Service for LGBTQ plus young people was discontinued by the federal government July 17th. And as such, the state has entered a new partnership with the Trevor Project in order to provide tailored, enhanced training so that our 98 crisis centers will continue to provide for the needs of LGBTQ plus people as they reach out for help through 988. So we've been working pretty closely with the Trevor Project, and they have conducted discovery process surveys, and they are developing a training schedule and content that will be tailored to the needs specifically for our crisis counselors in California. The training will be offered December through March. We are also working on understanding the landscape of our mobile crisis services. So we are working at Cal HHS and DHCS with a team of researchers who will launch the second national survey of mobile crisis programs. And they will provide a deep dive into 5 states, as well as looking at the national landscape, and California is one of the deep dive states. The survey is going to launch soon in December. And then we will be getting complete written products by June. Look forward to learning more about what's happening out there. In terms of communication about 988, the state has launched billboards and advertisements starting in September, running through the end of January to promote 988. There are hundreds of posted billboards and digital ads in all the major cities in California. So that's pretty exciting work. In terms of an FYI, in terms of what's happening in about communication about 988. So let me just tell you quickly about what Proposition 1 is. In March of last year, California voters passed Prop 1, which helps to modernize the state's behavioral health care system. We're looking at the Behavioral Services Act, which will reform behavioral health care funding so that we can provide services to Californians with the most significant behavioral health needs. And we'll be focusing on outcomes, accountability, and equity. So that for the California Department of Public Health, they've been charged with administer statewide prevention services. So 4% of funding from the Behavioral Services Act will go toward that effort. And that State Department has released a document for public review. The public comment period will close on December 2nd. So the population-based prevention guide will give us a view into what CDPH will be planning. And the part that's going to interest all of us that's specific to this work is really the 988 communication. So there's going to be a creation of a new public awareness campaign for 988 beginning in fiscal year 27-28. And CDPH will be working with experts and tribes to provide training and technical assistance of the needs of this grant program, and will invest in a statewide outreach campaign to promote 988. And we'll be working with community-based organizations and tribes to make sure that the communication is tailored to meet the needs of specific populations. And then I mentioned before, but just looking forward to the January 28th and April 29th reconvening of the Policy Advisory Group. And that's it. I made it super short and quick so that we can get out. Thanks.
Right. Thank you for that update. Any questions on this agenda item from the board members? All right. Hearing none, we will move to our next agenda item, which is, are there any agenda items for future meetings that the board would like to suggest? I know we've identified a couple during the discussion today, but anything we haven't covered? No, seeing and hearing none. This is an opportunity for public comment for matters that are not on the agenda. So anything that we haven't covered under the agenda today that the public would like to make comment on, now is the opportunity to do so. I'll start with the public that's in the room. Any public comment on non-agenda items? All right, seeing none. How about online? Any public comment online? Looks like we have one. If you go ahead and unmute your microphone, please.
Thank you. My name is Trent Murphy. I'm here representing CADP, the California Association of Alcohol and Drug Program Executives. We represent California's substance use disorder treatment providers across the state, including the organizations delivering critical 988 crisis services. Our behavioral health crisis system is neither fully funded right now nor operating at needed capacity. Our providers are reporting gaps in access to crisis care, stabilization services, and suicide prevention programs. And additionally, at the federal level, we are already seeing cuts to behavioral health services, which is only going to drive increased demand for state-funded crisis interventions. So I guess final closing thoughts is reducing the availability of crisis interventions now means fewer resources precisely when demand is rising and federal support is falling. Providers and, most importantly, the consumers who depend on these services are counting on them remaining available. And the cost to them is going to be far greater than any cost savings the state may receive from reductions. So just wanted to keep that in mind for the board heading forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public online? Seeing none, we'll move to our next agenda item number 11, which is the adjournment of the meeting. This concludes the fourth meeting of the 988 Technical Advisory Board for 2025. I thank everybody for the vigorous discussion today and look forward to seeing you in the new year. This meeting's adjourned.